All right, good morning and welcome back to tuned in and listening to Bat Talk with Sharona. I'm your host. My name is Sharona, and as promised, we are joined now by Tim Graham. Tim is a reporter. He covers the Buffalo area. He covers the Buffalo Bills, covers the Sabres. We're talking about the Patrick Kane allegations. We'll talk some Buffalo Bills. But for those of you who aren't familiar, we'll let him come in, introduce himself. And by the way, Tim has the best Twitter game in the business. So if you're not following him on Twitter, you need to get on that. You need to get up on your Twitter game because you're missing out on a lot. Tim, thank you so much for joining me.
Sharona, thanks for having me on and for the kind words. I'm an acquired taste on Twitter, so I'm glad that you like it. It's there are an awful lot of people out there who don't, but I'm just being myself, and I'd like to say that if people were to approach me at a bar and ask me or say the things to me that they do on Twitter, the responses that I give on there are pretty much what I'd probably give you right then and there. So you ask me a nice question, I'll put my arm around you, maybe buy you a beer, and we'll talk sports. But, yeah, if you want to be a hammerhead, then you get what you deserve.
Yeah, Twitter's an interesting tool. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the segment, but people feel free to say things. First of all, let's be real. People would never say the things that they say to you in person that they say to you on Twitter. And if you've not ever, go check out Tim's Twitter. It's @by Tim Graham, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I mean, people say some of the awfulest things on social media in general. It's not just Twitter. But Twitter definitely has that reputation. It's very trollish at times, and you handle it well. You and Mike Silver are sort of my heroes there. I used to engage with trolls, and now I just tend to overlook it because that's just my personality. Is just But I do think, though, occasionally you have to come in and set people straight and let them know that you're not a pushover. And you do a very good job of that, by the way.
Thank you, Sharona. Sometimes I'm just defending myself and my work, but sometimes it's cathartic, too. It just feels good to, let people know that you're going to try to get under my skin, but it's not going to work.
Yeah, it's definitely fun to watch you engage and put people in their place. So, first of all, tell everybody, I know I introduced you. You, among other things, you cover the Buffalo Bills. You do an excellent job, by the way. I'm not kidding. I really do admire you, and I admire your work. How long have you been doing that? And just give us a little bit of a background on you.
I've been at the Buffalo News on and off since 2000. I came from Las Vegas, where I worked for 5 years. I was a columnist out there, originally from Cleveland, so I wanted to get closer to home and work in a major league market, and so moving to Buffalo was a natural for me when I had the opportunity. And I covered the National Hockey League for 7 years, left to go work at the Palm Beach Post to cover the Miami Dolphins, and I was there about 7 months and was offered a job to cover the AFC East for ESPN, and I couldn't turn that down. And, ESPN is viewed by many to be a pinnacle, but spent 3 years at ESPN, and when my contract was up, they asked me to come back, but I had to respectfully decline because my heart was back in Buffalo, and working for the Buffalo News was very much like a family to me. And so I came back, and I covered. So I've been covering the NFL for, this will be my 7th season over 8 years. Because when I first got back to the Buffalo News, I was doing long form writing on anything. I might have been writing about mobsters one week, or criminals the next. Different criminals the next. A hoarder who disappeared in his own home. He was found dead 2 years after he disappeared, and all kinds of fascinating stories that weren't sports. And now I came back and covered the NFL, and I can't complain. I've been blessed.
We'll get you to give some of our young journalists listening out there some advice at the end of the show. It's interesting, but the Buffalo community seems to be, to me, one of the best football communities out there. And I cover hockey too, but I'm very much more football centric. Football is king. There's just in the past certainly there has been more interest. Now I'm in Tennessee, and of course the Predators have been here for a while, and there's definitely interest there. But it does seem to me that Buffalo is somewhat of a special place. What is it like to cover sports there?
It is incredible. The fans are passionate. They are smart. They especially know their hockey and their football for obvious reasons. But it is a great baseball town. And a lot of Yankees fans, because there has never been a major league team in Buffalo, they have kind of adopted the Yankees over the years because, well, it's close enough, and the Yankees have had a lot of success over the decades. And of course, Toronto is just about 90 miles away to the north, and you have to factor in a border and a really busy highway system up in Toronto, so it takes a little time to get up there. But so you have the Blue Jays and the Raptors and the Maple Leafs nearby, and it's just a really good sports area. And there's so many options, so many stories to cover, and we've seen a rise in local kids making it big in the past, say, 10 years. And just to name a couple, we have Patrick Kane, who I know we're going to talk about a little bit later. He comes from Buffalo. The Gronkowski family is from Buffalo. So it's been a lot of fun on a lot of levels to cover sports in Buffalo.
It's always great to see local kids do well. There's no doubt about that.
It is, and those are fun stories to cover. And it gets you away when you're covering, say, the Buffalo Bills. You get into the minutia of a team. You're talking about the practice squad players and transactions and a battle among the backup offensive linemen. And sometimes you get so involved in the organizational type stuff and factor in 15 straight years of not making the playoffs and a lot of losing records. And it can get rather monotonous. But then you thankfully have the stories like Rob Gronkowski or a lot of coaches and general managers have emerged from Buffalo. Brian Dable on the Patriots staff, David Caldwell, the general manager of the Jacksonville Jaguars, Tom Telesco, the general manager of the San Diego Chargers. And so it's always nice to write the local boy done good story. Never gets old, and they're always fun to write.
Yeah, those are the stories that I like too, and I'm covering the entire NFL this year, and I used to cover the Titans exclusively, and I understand completely what you're talking about. You do tend to get more involved in the minutiae. The guys you get, you become familiar with guys that aren't household names, and that guy who's been on 3 teams in the past 2 years that is doing really well in camp, and those are the stories that do touch your heart, and they're fun to tell.
And I'd be remiss to leave out the kids that have come from the University of Buffalo too. Khalil Mack, big player obviously for the Oakland Raiders. James Starks, who's also a local boy, was the starting running back for the Packers when they won the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. So the University of Buffalo has started to churn out some NFL players, and it was a Division I AA program just 16 years ago or something like that. So it's there's a lot of stuff going on in Buffalo. Big draft picks in basketball over the years. Even you want to talk about the college basketball scene, 4 Division I teams, and they're small schools, but Andrew Nicholson, now with the Orlando Magic, was big. Christian Leitner's from Buffalo. There have been Cliff Robinson, even if we want to go all the way back to Bob Lanier, but it's a sneaky, rich sports town and sports area. People think of Buffalo, first thing they think about, 4 straight Super Bowl losses, never won a championship, a major championship. Yeah, the Bills won the AFL title a couple of times in the 60s, but you think about getting screwed over by Brett Hull's foot in the crease in the 99 Stanley Cup Finals. And you just think of losers. but there's so much more to it, and that's why I enjoy working here. If it was a town of losers, I wouldn't want to raise my kids there.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Bills and the Titans and the Oilers franchises are so intertwined in terms of playoff wins and losses, and of course the Music City Miracle and all of that.
Well, that's the last time the Bills were in the playoffs.
Yeah, exactly.
The Music City Miracle was such a curse that it knocked the Bills out of the postseason forever and counting so far. So, yeah, you're right. It's we have a lot in common.
Well, that was just revenge for the playoff game that the Oilers they lost, an infamous
the all-time comeback, right?
Yeah, all-time comeback.
I did a story on that on the anniversary a couple of years ago, and interviewed Warren Moon for it. And of course, the debate is whether or not the Titans or the Oilers quit. And so that's. And I know that the Oilers and became the Titans. So I don't really. Do the fans in Nashville really identify with the Oilers at all?
Mostly not. Now, I grew up in Texas, but I was a Cowboys fan. My father taught at the University of Texas at Austin. We lived in Austin, and back then, the Cowboys were. Of course, the Cowboys are always big. America's team, rah rah rah, that kind of thing. But most fans in Tennessee became fans when Bud Adams moved the team here, and fortunately, some of the old Oiler fans came along. Now some didn't. Bud was very infamously had a love-hate relationship with his native city, with Houston, and some fans will never forgive him for some of the things that happened in moving the team and all of that, which we won't get into. But some of those fans did come, and it was nice. They were an added element that allowed some bridging and bringing some of the memories and that passion, that the old Houston Oilers fans had for the team. And that was nice because, when a team moves like that, it tends to take on a new identity, but you can't forget, the historical stuff. And
you're talking to, like I said, a Cleveland native, and the Browns ripped my heart out when they moved to Baltimore. It actually helped out my career, though, because in this field, it's so much easier to write a comprehensive, definitive, objective story when there's no rooting interest. And really, what the Browns or Art Modell did by moving the Browns to Baltimore was ended my rooting interest in the NFL, at least. And it has actually helped. And when the new Browns came back, they were so different and so awful. And I just identified them as not my Browns, and I just stopped caring. And it actually was very good for me in many ways. But that doesn't mean that I enjoyed my city's heart being ripped to shreds.
I still lament the demise of the AFC Central, but then we need to talk about the Bills. We could talk about those days for hours if you have time, and I know that you don't. So let's talk a little bit about the Bills. You mentioned Bills Mafia. They're a very smart fan base. I completely agree. They're very excited right now, rightfully so, because the team had a big win last weekend over the Indianapolis Colts. What is the vibe like right now? And tell us how different it is with Rex Ryan as the head coach.
Well, it's electric, and it has been for a long time. And it's not just Rex Ryan. And one thing that I always like to point out, it's easy to use a catchphrase like the Rex effect on the team. It's easy to look at Rex because he's so gregarious. He's so ubiquitous in the media, and the things that he says always get attention. So it's easy to say, boy, look at what Rex has done. But really, it goes back to last season when Ralph Wilson, the founder of the team, died. He was in his 90s. And Bills fans really had come to the belief over generations, really, that once Ralph Wilson died, that the team was going to leave. And whether it was Los Angeles or Toronto or London or what, it was just there's an inferiority complex in towns like Buffalo that we're going to lose our team. because we're small market and there's a vacancy in a lot of big cities where the NFL wants to be. So when the Pegula family, who owned the Buffalo Sabres, emerged and made a play for the team and bought them, there was a euphoria that the team wasn't going anywhere, that people who feared losing their team or not having their children or their grandchildren grow up with NFL in their town just really fell back in love with the team. They had always been apprehensive about going all in with their fandom, I think, especially during this 15-year playoff drought, that, I don't want to give everything to this team because they're just going to crush my soul and leave at some point. Well, they're not leaving. So the fans who were kind of on the fence jumped back in with both feet, and the season ticket renewals and new season ticket purchases actually had its biggest spike while Doug Marrone was still the head coach because of the Pegulas buying the team.
Right.
Now, of course, Rex Ryan coming in after Doug Marrone essentially quit.
That was so weird.
Exercise. Yeah, it was, and it really, a lot of Bills fans are tickled that he is he's an assistant offensive line coach with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who I think gave up 5 sacks on opening day.
Yeah.
They're giggling at that. So Rex Ryan comes in, and a larger-than-life guy, the type of coach that the Bills never would have gone after in the past. I mean, you look at, they're all wooden. You take a look at all the Mike Mularkey, Doug Marrone, Chan Gailey, even Marv Levy, Hank Bulla, Chuck Knock. I mean, it's just one, nondescript guy after another. Now, of course, everyone fell in love with Marv Levy, and that's what going to 4 straight Super Bowls will do. We knew we can recite everything about the guy's bio and all his accomplishments. But the Bills had never gone for the big splash. And so they went after Rex Ryan, got him. And then Sharona really carried over with the player personnel moves, too. The LaShawn McCoy deal was a big splash. Of course, Richie Incognito, controversial, but still a big splash. The Charles Clay free agency acquisition.
I loved that.
Yeah, I did too. I thought it was a big addition. But the thing that really was a lightning bolt is that the LaShawn McCoy thing was a trade. Richie Incognito, what were his other options? Percy Harvin, what were his other options? Matt Castle was a trade. But Charles Clay was coveted on the free agent market and chose Buffalo. And those are things that really don't happen. Mario Williams, of course, signed a contract to come to the Bills from Houston, but it took the richest contract in NFL history for a defensive player to get him to do it. So there was this slow transformation of Buffalo turning the corner in terms of being, that inferiority complex I talked about before to, you know what, we're all right. And Rex Ryan is the type of guy that can help a fan base and also the locker room believe that they deserve to win. And there's this mentality that there was this hope. There was this anticipation. And then Sunday comes along and they just clean the Colts' clocks.
Oh, my goodness.
And it was tangible evidence that it's okay for us to be excited because this might actually be something. Sharona, the excitement is palpable because, and obviously it's week 1, but it's like, you know what, we can enjoy this. And let's say the Bills finish 8-8, they're going to get their licks in. They're going to thump a team or two, and there might be some setbacks along the way, but this is our team. We're all in, and we're going to have some fun.
You mentioned the Pegulas, and we talk about Ken Pegula a lot on this show. How important have they been to Buffalo as a city? And there were some rumblings about the Sabres too.
Sure. I can't even put into words. And a lot of people outside the Buffalo area might not realize what the Pegulas do or have done to the area because from the outside, they own the hockey team and the football team. But they have helped build up the entire downtown infrastructure with the Harbor Center, which is a hockey facility. There's a Marriott attached to it, a restaurant, coffee shops. They are just, I wholeheartedly believe that they will build a new stadium downtown within the next 5 to 10 years. But they are developing like crazy, and they are putting money into the city. Now, of course, they're making money back off of it. It's not as though it's charity. But
well,
the
like
things that they're putting in,
do.
Yeah, right. But the things that they're doing, it's feeding other businesses. So there are other people who are coming downtown. And it used to be a wasteland, and I speak from a pretty deep knowledge because the Buffalo News offices are right across the street from where this new hockey and hotel and restaurant complex is. You know, I think you're going to see some entertainment, a lot of additional things coming up through downtown. For 15 years, it was a wasteland. When we wanted to get something to eat, if I was working the night shift in the office, we would have to go miles away from our own office, and we were in the heart of downtown. You couldn't go get a cup of coffee anywhere but in the machine on the second floor. You know, you couldn't go anywhere to go get a good cup of coffee, or if you wanted to go somewhere for lunch, you had to get in your car. And now at the Buffalo News, we can walk to, and I'm not exaggerating, 8, 9 different places to go get a good meal, or there are hotels, across the street from where we used to be. There was a parking lot there before, so it's just amazing. And the Pegulas are responsible for most of that, and that's what they've done for Buffalo. We talked about Rex Ryan being able to change the fans or the players' mentality that, hey, we deserve to win. The Pegulas, in many other ways, are just helping the average Buffalo person think, you know what, we can have nice things. We haven't had these things before, and now we do, and isn't it nice?
Yeah, they are fascinating, and Kim Pegula is fascinating to me because, the NFL has realized what an asset she can be, and she got appointed to I forget what it's called, a very influential board that I believe Jerry Jones is the head of, and I'm very curious to see, very anxious to see what her involvement, and not just with the Bills, but with the NFL in general, what that is going to lead to, because I do think that she is incredibly bright, and she's someone who can, teach the NFL some things.
Yeah, I think so, and especially at this time with so many social issues that are going on, whether it's, the Adrian Peterson suspension or the Ray Rice suspension, women's rights, just the different social issues about abuse, domestic violence, crime, a woman's perspective is needed, I think, more than ever within the NFL. And they do have some female owners, but they're generally let their sons run the things. I'm talking about Hallis and Mara, and there's a lot of
McCaskey.
Yes, but they don't really take a role. Now, I don't think Kim Pegula has taken a role yet. They've owned the team for about a year and a week or something like that. Officially, they've owned the team for less than a year. They were voted in and finally approved. So I think there's probably an uneasiness. She's not coming in guns blazing, and I don't think the NFL wants her to at such a sensitive time. But I think eventually, and this is not necessarily a prediction, it's at least my hope, that Kim Pegula becomes an incredibly influential voice in the NFL, not just a woman who's married to a guy who struck it rich in the oil business, but actually uses her platform. And let me just really quickly say, some people look at Kim Pegula. She's a very attractive woman. She's a lot younger than Terry Pegula, her husband. They did not have money when they got married. I mean, I'm sure they were doing okay. They worked in the oil industry, but he didn't strike it rich on his fracking business until long after they were married. So this is not a situation where Terry Pegula went out and found this attractive young woman because he had all this money and she was attracted to that. They've been together for a long time. Pre-wealth. And one of the fascinating, I think, dimensions to their ownership is when they walk into the room at the owners' meetings, whenever they have them on the quarterly basis, they're probably the only people in that room who weren't wealthy 30 years ago. They weren't wealthy from the time they were born. Now, granted, there are some owners who are self-made millionaires, Paul Allen, all that stuff. But I think that they are probably the newest. They have the newest money out of anybody in that room. And I do think that there's still a hierarchy. They're new. You can't just come in and start making changes and pounding your fist on the table. So I think as they ease into their ownership and, 5 years turns into 10, that my hope is that Kim Pegula becomes a force in the NFL.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you just said. We've got to talk a little about it. There's so much to cover, and it's so great to talk to you. I have to ask you about Tyrod Taylor. I call him Ty God. That's a nickname that the fantasy football community, of which I'm a part of, we've nicknamed him Ty God. A very, very, very promising start for that young man. What is the thoughts around him, and what did you think about his performance?
I thought it was phenomenal, and he completed 14 of his first 16 passes. He didn't have consecutive incompletions until the fourth quarter. He was in command. He ran the offense, did well at a time when LaShawn McCoy wasn't able to get any kind of traction. Tyrod Taylor was able to move the ball, and he went deep. He connected with Percy Harvin on a 51-yard touchdown. It was a gorgeous throw. It was not a fluke in any way. It wasn't as though Percy Harvin bailed him out. It was on the dot from 51 yards into the end zone. Yeah, it wasn't a catch and run. It wasn't like he threw it 8 yards and Percy Harvin did the rest. He ran a lot and well. And the thing that Tyrod Taylor helped the Bills do yesterday that they couldn't do all last season is gain chunk yardage. And I looked up last year's big plays, and the touchdown to Percy Harvin would have been, I think, their third or fourth longest play of the year. And they had 4 runs of 10 yards or longer. One of them was called, they had a fifth called back. LaShawn McCoy had a 12-yard touchdown run called back. They had 27 runs of 10 yards or more all last year, and they had 4 in this game alone. So now that might not sound like a lot, but multiply 4 times 16, and it's a lot more than 27. And Tyrod Taylor had the longest one of all, 31-yard gain. So he's a guy that really adds some electricity. He had a sideline route. I believe it was on a third down. I think it was 3rd and 8, in which he connected on an out pattern, and it was a difficult throw, and he nailed it. And that's just the type of quarterbacking Bills fans haven't been used to. And I just want to point out one stat. I looked it up as the game was going on and kept track of it. 92% of the Bills' total offense on Sunday came from players who weren't on the team last year.
Wow.
So only 8%, and that was from 2 players, from Boobie Dixon and from Robert Woods, accounted for the difference. Everything else was from players who weren't Bills last year, whether it be draft picks or trades or free agency. That's how much impact and how much of an overhaul that offense has had.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I agree. I think that he's a very exciting guy. We talked about him a little bit we'll be talking about him a little bit in our first segment for this show. We're pre-recording this on Tuesday night. But it's interesting. He was a guy that got a chance to sit and learn. So we're going to be comparing how his career trajectory might be a little bit different from your Cam Newtons and your Teddy Bridgewaters and guys who didn't get that opportunity and what that means for young quarterbacks and things of that nature. But it does look like the Bills are building a very solid team. I'm a big fan of Doug Whaley, by the way. I think he's done an excellent job. Now, a lot of people criticized him for Sammy Watkins, and that was definitely a lot to give up. But you've seen the talent that young man has, and obviously he was not a factor Sunday because of Vontae Davis.
Yeah, the Colts were able to take him out of the game, and Vontae Davis is one of the better cornerbacks in the NFL, and the Colts really didn't have many strong matchups otherwise. So why go to their strength on defense when Charles Clay and Percy Harvin and LaShawn McCoy can do some stuff out of the backfield? So, yeah, Sammy Watkins didn't even have a target until the fourth quarter. And you may look at that and say, okay, so a guy who doesn't even get thrown at, you gave up 2 first-round picks for him. That's something that is going to probably be the measuring stick for Sammy Watkins and for Doug Whaley for the rest of their careers, because you look at the receivers that the Bills could have had without giving up that first-round pick. They could have had Mike Evans. They could have had Odell Beckham Jr. They could have had Eric Ebron. I mean, there's all kinds of things they could have done and still had a first-round pick this year. It's something where I think that no matter how good Sammy Watkins is, there's that, but they could have had him a player like him and something else. And you'll never know what that something else might have been. Another quarterback this year, or be able to trade, use that draft pick to acquire something else.
And that's the thing. It's the quarterback thing.
Exactly. So Sammy Watkins is going to be a fine player in the NFL. I don't think the Bills fans are going to be able to justify that trade, because I think he's going to make some highlight catches.
Yeah, and I think the beauty about Tyrod Taylor, I started to call him Tyrod Taylor, is that if he does turn out to be as good as we think that he can be, it takes the sting away from not having that first-round pick this past year and possibly missing on E.J. Manuel.
That's right, and the Bills aren't paying him anything. He's getting paid, I think, in, coupons or something. But, no one wanted him. He was a backup quarterback somewhere, and the Bills saw something in him and were willing to give him a shot. But they're not paying him a lot, and that allows them to commit money elsewhere, and that helped them with the Marcel Darius extension, and that was a tricky one because they've already committed so much money to the defensive line, which might be the best in the NFL. But that's what happens with, that's how the Seattle Seahawks were able to build their defense and have guys like Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman and all those guys that they do have, because they weren't paying Russell Wilson anything. Now, of course, that's changed, but, there's a window, and the Bills need to strike while they have this bargain quarterback. If he does work out, like you say, Sharona, the window is small, but the window is there.
Yeah, and we didn't even talk about this. Of course, this was pre-Rex Ryan, but I believe it was Doug Whaley that swung that steal of a trade for Jerry Hughes.
Yeah, it was. They traded Kelvin Shepard, who I think has bounced around. I don't even know if he's in the NFL anymore.
I don't think he is.
Went to the Colts and then to the Dolphins, and Jerry Hughes has been a monster. And one of my favorite stats or sentences to say is that the Bills have 3 Pro Bowlers on their defensive line, and the fourth guy is back-to-back 10-digit sacks. So
that's crazy.
Not bad for the guy who can't make the Pro Bowl. They are star-studded along that front.
Definitely. We're not going to get a chance to get into it in any detail, but Patrick Kane, rape allegations against him. The grand jury was dismissed so that the parties could engage in settlement discussions. What is your sense? Is that case going to get resolved?
Well, I think that the grand jury was postponed. We're hearing that the grand jury will be reconvened, but we're not really sure what, and we're not supposed to know, really, because grand juries are super duper secret, and any information that gets out is potentially a felony, and we're not allowed to report a lot of things that we could get trouble. So, but we're hearing that it will continue, and but training camp for the Chicago Blackhawks start next week. And it's going to be interesting how they handle this, because Patrick Kane has not been charged with a crime, but do you want him around because he could be, and because of, the media circus that's going to, and I think I don't want to say media circus like, typical reporters out to, this is a big story, and this is something that, I think that the Chicago Blackhawks would be wise to not have him around, but also want to be loyal to your player if you're the Chicago Blackhawks. And then the other part of that, though, is that they've warned him so many times over the years that I've been told that Rocky Wirtz would like Patrick Kane gone, just because, hey, we've had sit-down talks with this guy for years about cleaning up his act.
He's been a bad boy. Yeah, he is. He's been a bad boy, no question. Yeah,
there's an awkward place for the Chicago Blackhawks to be in. It'll be interesting to see how they handle it.
Yeah, you mentioned the fact that the grand jury was put smoke. I mean, that is really unheard of. Those things don't typically happen. It is very unusual for the state to do something, the prosecutor to do something like that, and so it's going to be very interesting to see what does happen with that situation. Tim, thanks again for joining me. Tell everybody once again where they can find you out there on Twitter.
Sure, you can follow me on Twitter at @ByTimGraham, just like a byline in the newspaper, BY Tim Graham, and you'll see some football observations, some life observations, and a whole lot of killing time and a lot of silliness. So come along for the ride. You might enjoy it, you might hate it.
Well, thanks again, and have a great time in New York City, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Sure, Sharona, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks a lot. Okay, bye-bye.